All right, everyone, welcome. I'm really excited to get into this today. Whether you're a DPT student just getting started, a resident in the thick of it, or a seasoned clinician prepping for your OCS exam, we're going to do a deep dive here. We're going to pull apart the relationship between science, evidence, and our own clinical reasoning. And look, this is way more than just studying for a test. This is about building the intellectual toolkit you need to become a true expert practitioner. So let's jump in.
So let's start with a scene that I guarantee we've all experienced. You use your go-to favorite manual therapy technique on a patient. They come back for their next visit and they're feeling way better. And that immediate reflexive thought is, yes, it worked. I fixed them. But right there, that's where we have to pump the brakes and start thinking like a scientist. We're immediately face-to-face with a classic logical fallacy. It has a fancy name, post hoc ergo propter hoc, which literally just means after this, therefore because of this. Assuming that just because one thing followed another, the first thing must have caused the second. It is one of the biggest, most common mental traps in our profession, and we're going to tear it apart today.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the bedrock. What do we even mean by reasoning and truth in science? From there, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of evidence-based practice. Then we'll tackle what is honestly the hardest part, recognizing the flaws in our own thinking. We'll put it all to the test with a case challenge, and then we'll wrap it all up with 5 key takeaways that you can bring with you to the clinic tomorrow.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Reasoning, Truth, and Science. This is all about building your clinical foundation. Before we can even begin to talk about appraising evidence, we have to get on the same page about what it is we're actually looking for. What is truth in a clinical context? This stuff underpins every single decision we make. This quote really nails a critical distinction. We've got to separate 3 different kinds of truth. There's objective truth, the stuff that's measurable and real, whether we like it or not. Then there's personal truth, that's your faith, your gut feeling. And finally, partisan truth. That's what your particular tribe or school of thought believes, which might just be an echo chamber. Our professional duty, our mandate, is to relentlessly chase that objective truth, while staying hyper-aware of how our personal feelings and our groupthink can cloud our judgment.
And that leads to this huge question that you have to ask yourself constantly. Are you being rational or are you rationalizing? And there's a world of difference. Being rational means you start with the evidence and you follow it wherever it leads, even if you don't like the destination. Rationalizing is the exact opposite. You start with the conclusion you want to be true, and then you go cherry-picking for bits of evidence to support it. One is science, the other is just defending your ego. In the clinic, we're actually juggling 3 types of reasoning all the time, probably without even realizing it. First, there's abductive reasoning. This is your initial diagnostic leap, your most likely explanation. A patient comes in with radiating leg pain, and your brain immediately jumps to lumbar radiculopathy. That's an abductive leap. Then there's inductive reasoning. This is all about pattern recognition. You see 10 patients with similar signs, you give them all the same exercise, and they all seem to improve. You inductively reason that the exercise is probably helpful for this pattern. And finally, there's deductive reasoning. This is your straight-line logical process, like the ATO model. If my assessment leads to this diagnosis, and if this diagnosis calls for this treatment, then this treatment should lead to my desired outcome.
So now that we have that foundation in how to think, let's get practical. That brings us to Section 2, Evidence-Based Practice Essentials. This is your clinical toolkit for finding truth. We're moving from the why of science to the how of applying it every day.
I absolutely love this quote from Fabio because it shatters a huge myth about EBP. Many clinicians think EBP is about finding the one right answer in a research article. It's not. Research deals in averages, in measures of central tendency. It tells you what works for the average patient in a study. Our real job as expert clinicians is to take that information and use it to build a smart, reasoned philosophy of patient care that we can then intelligently adapt to the unique N-of-1 human being sitting right in front of us. It's a guide, not a cookbook.
So where do we start? It all begins with asking a good question, because a vague question like, what's the best way to treat knee pain, is completely unanswerable. It'll send you down a rabbit hole. That's where the PICO process is so essential. It gives your question structure. You define the patient or problem, the intervention you're interested in, the comparison group, and the outcome you care about. When you do that, you transform a fuzzy clinical uncertainty into a sharp, searchable question. This is the absolute, non-negotiable first step.
Okay, now we're getting to the tough stuff. This is arguably the most critical and challenging part of achieving clinical mastery. Section 3, Recognizing Faulty Thinking.
This is all about turning that scientific lens back on ourselves and examining the flaws in our own thinking. This is not for the faint of heart.
First, we have to be clear on the difference between logical fallacies and cognitive biases. Think of it this way. A logical fallacy is a flaw in an argument. The structure is just bad. For example, saying a treatment works because a famous physical therapist endorses it, that's an appeal to authority. The argument is weak because fame doesn't equal evidence. A cognitive bias, on the other hand, is a flaw in your thinking. It's a built-in glitch in your brain's software. Confirmation bias is the perfect example. Your brain naturally seeks out information that confirms what you already believe. So one is a bad argument, the other is a bad mental habit.
And this brings us right back to our opening scenario, that post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. The patient got better after my treatment, so my treatment caused the improvement. The biggest counterargument to this, the thing we always have to consider, is natural history. We know that so many of the conditions we treat tend to get better on their own over 4 to 6 weeks. If our treatment happens to fall within that window, we absolutely cannot claim credit without first accounting for the powerful effect of time itself.
Here's another fallacy you'll see all the time: the red herring. This is when a piece of information is thrown into the mix that is true but totally irrelevant, and it serves only to distract you from the real issue. The classic orthopedic example is an asymptomatic meniscal tear on an MRI in an older adult with knee pain. Is the tear real? Yes, it's there on the film, but does it matter? We know from tons of research that people in that age group without any knee pain at all have meniscal tears. Fixating on that MRI finding is a huge red herring that can lead us down a completely wrong path. Now let's jump over to a cognitive bias, anchoring bias. This is our brain's tendency to latch onto the very first piece of information we get and give it way too much weight. A patient comes in with a referral slip from their doctor that says lumbar radiculopathy. That diagnosis can become an anchor that's so heavy, we subconsciously spend our whole evaluation trying to prove it right, instead of objectively looking at all the data, even the data that might point in a totally different direction.
An anchoring bias often works hand in hand with its nasty cousin, confirmation bias. This is our tendency to actively search for, interpret, and remember information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. So if a clinician is really invested in a specific classification system, they might, without even realizing it, overemphasize the patient's signs that fit their model while conveniently ignoring or downplaying the ones that don't. The evaluation stops being an objective search for truth and becomes an exercise in proving themselves right.
All right, enough theory. It's necessary, but it's not enough. We have to be able to apply this stuff. So let's move into Section 4 and put it all to the test with a case challenge. As we go through this, I want you to actively hunt for the potential biases and fallacies that could trip us up.
Okay, here's our patient, a 45-year-old man, new onset of low back pain after he lifted a heavy box. On your physical exam, he's got a positive straight leg raise. Sounds pretty straightforward, a classic presentation.
Now, based only on that information, what's your number one working hypothesis? I'm willing to bet the phrase lumbar disc herniation just flashed in your mind. And that's a perfectly reasonable abductive leap. But now I want you to engage in some metacognition. What cognitive bias could you be falling for right now? You're already in danger of dropping anchor on that diagnosis. Just being aware of that pull is half the battle. Okay, but now we get some more information. You find out he had an MRI 2 years ago that showed a mild L4-L5 disc bulge, but he was totally asymptomatic at the time. You also learn he has a history of anxiety, and he's expressing a strong belief that something is out of place. Well, this just got a lot more complicated than a simple biomedical problem, didn't it? So how does this new information make you rethink things? More specifically, can you spot the potential red herring here? It's that 2-year-old MRI. We know that finding is real, the bulge exists, but it's very likely an irrelevant truth. It was there when he had no pain. It's a classic red herring that can distract us from what might be the more powerful drivers of his pain right now: his anxiety and his unhelpful beliefs about the structural integrity of his spine. Okay, time for a quick pop quiz to help lock in these concepts. I want you to actually pause and think about your answers. First question. A colleague says a treatment must be good because everyone is doing it. What's the name of that logical fallacy? Second question. You can easily remember your amazing home run successes with patients, but the less than stellar outcomes are kind of fuzzy. What cognitive bias is at play? Okay, here we go. The answer to number 1 is the bandwagon fallacy. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's effective. The burden of proof doesn't just disappear. The answer to number 2 is recall bias.
Our brains are hardwired to more easily remember emotionally charged or favorable events, which can seriously inflate how effective we think we are.
Let's boil this all down. If you only remember 5 things from our time today, make it these. Number 1, strive for objective truth. Learn to separate it from your personal beliefs and what the group thinks. Number 2, be rational. That means you test your hypotheses. Don't just rationalize your foregone conclusions. 3, get really good at spotting logical fallacies, like post hoc and red herrings in the arguments you hear. 4, and this is the hardest one, turn that lens on yourself and relentlessly hunt for your own biases, like anchoring and confirmation bias. And finally, number 5, use EBP as a tool to develop a reasoned, flexible approach to your individual patient, not as a rigid rulebook.
So I'll leave you with this one last challenge to take with you. The next time a patient outcome completely surprises you, whether it's an unexpected success or a frustrating failure, what's your immediate reaction going to be? Will you just write it off as a random fluke, an anomaly? Or will you seize it as a priceless opportunity to pause, reflect, and really dig into the clinical reasoning that led you to be surprised in the first place? That choice, made day after day, is what separates the good clinicians from the truly great ones. Thank you.